Hello everybody, welcome to Gone Hollow Minis. My name is Colt, and this is finally another Tarnished Tuesday. Now, we're finished up with the first box, the Weeping Peninsula box set, and we're moving into Limgrave proper. So, to be accurate with the video game, we're going to start with the Tree Sentinel, the first boss that everyone tries to beat, but usually never does. At least not until 30 more hours into the game when everyone is overleveled and can just kinda steamroll him. But honestly, this is also just a very good miniature. There's a ton of really well-rendered filigree and a lot of tiny details that will look really good with just a little bit of work. So for this paint job, we'll be leaning into the simpler but more impactful techniques that'll get your minis onto the tabletop in no time while still looking pretty good. Now you'll also notice that I've already detached his shield. This might feel wrong since you have to break the super glue, but it'll really help us get into all those nooks and crannies below it. So without further ado, we can move on to our prime and base coat. I'm going to be priming this with Pro Acryl Black Primer, but you can use any regular primer. I used Rattlecan for quite some time and never had any issues with it. Once that's on, I'm going to hit everything with the base coat of Pro Acryl Mahogany. This is a really nice rich brown color that'll be a good base for all of the gold tones that we have to layer up here in a little bit. But while I'm doing that in the background, where have these episodes been? Well, to be entirely honest, I just got busy. Right now, I only have the ability to do YouTube part-time, so when I picked up a few more hours at my actual job over summer, something had to give. These particular Tarnished Tuesday episodes I film over the weekend, and it takes pretty much the entire weekend. So working a full week between work and videos, and then coming back to the weekend to do more videos, just kinda took it out of me. So if you do enjoy these videos and would like to see more of them, please hit all of the regular YouTube buttons. I know it's a cliche, but every like, view, and comment really helps. And if you really want to help out, share this video with a friend, a family member, or an unwitting passerby. So for my own schedule and mental sanity, these videos will most likely become bi-weekly, so every other week. There might be some additional shorts content in order to get some of the more repetitive and less interesting miniatures out of the way without doing an entire video on them, but bi-weekly is kind of the new rule. So thank you all so much for the support that you've already shown with this series, and I hope that you understand this change in schedule. But with all that out of the way, we can get back to painting. With our mahogany base coat applied, we can go ahead and move on to our first layer of dry brushing, but since it's been a little bit, how about a quick refresher on that? We don't actually want our brush to be entirely bone dry, so to help with that, I use a bit of sponge I've put into a Citadel paint pot. I add about a brush full of water to this, dab it in with a finger, and then I can use this with my dry brush to make sure my bristles are nice and moist. Not damp, but moist. With that, I can apply a tiny bit of paint to my brush. This is AK Old Gold, one of my new absolute favorite gold paints. We don't want very much on our bristles at all here, just enough to get a nice thin layer of pigment over our highest raised details. Apply this with a very light touch, only depositing paint on the higher raised details and not on our brown recesses. With that applied, he's honestly already looking pretty good, but we can go ahead and layer up our highlights still. The first layer I'm going to use is Scale 75 Moonstone Alchemy. This is a nice, slightly paler but still warm metallic. I'm using roughly the same motion here. However, instead of just focusing on the highest faces of the model, I'm also trying to pick out the different shapes and details within the armor itself. Especially on the horse armor, there's a lot of different flanges and different faces to the armor panels, so focusing a highlight on each of those will really help to bump up the silhouette. We'll refine this with more careful steps later, but this just helps to get our base highlights in that we can work off in later steps. Speaking of more careful steps, it's time to go back in and reinforce some of our shading. This is a very thinned down mix of African Shadow and Abaddon Black, but any black will work. I thin this down pretty far to somewhere between a glaze and a shade consistency. Then I just go ahead and glaze this into all of my recesses that I want to amp up a little bit more. Since we're using pretty basic techniques, we want to make sure that we amp up our contrast wherever we can, and this is a fantastic way to do that. So pay special attention to the overlapping armor plates. Shading these extra well can give you a really nice extra punch of contrast. After that, we can move on to our dreaded manual highlights. This is Pro Acryl White Gold. It's somewhere between gold and silver and will be a fantastic final highlight for our gold details. Again, try not to focus solely on highlighting the upper facing portions of the armor. Light bounces weirdly off of irregular shapes like this, so details like the bottom points of the neck horse armor will also catch light and deserve a highlight as well. Now is also a good time to mention that I was obviously repeating all of these steps on the shield as well. Now of course that's not the only metallics on this model. If we look at the concept art and the in-game model, we can see that the horse's skirt kind of thing is actually made of silver. Whether it's steel or something else, I don't know. But it does kind of break up the monotonous gold tone, so it's a good thing to emulate on our miniature. Just like the gold, I'm starting here with a dry brush. This is Vallejo Metal Color Steel. It's not the end of the world if some of this gets onto our golden armor, but the less cleanup the better, so be careful. Of course, some of the leaf-shaped scale pieces on this skirt section are still gold, so I went ahead and picked out some of them in AK Rusty Gold just to match the base armor color. Now, in the spirit of quick and easy techniques, I went ahead and hit this entire skirt piece with an all-over wash. This is Army Painter Dark Skin Tone. Is this going to win me a golden demon? No, probably not. But it does get my miniature on the table, and it looks pretty good while keeping the overall tone, so it works for me. And not to mention, if I have some spare time and want to go back in and clean this up later, I totally can. It's a step to build off of, not the final model. Your miniature isn't done until you say it's done. And this takes us to the nice thing about just painting big dudes in metal armor. Once you get the metallics done, you're pretty much there. To be honest, most of the other colors that are on this model I've already covered in a previous episode of this series. That's kind of the thing with painting video game models that are all based around the same general color palette. On that note though, it is one of the interesting things about painting miniatures based off of board game characters, especially from software games. When we play the video games, a lot of the tone and color palette just kind of appears dark and dingy. Maybe a little bit less with Elden Ring, but especially in Dark Souls, everything is just kind of varying shades of gray. However, when we paint these models, we get really familiar with the subtle intricacies of those different shades of gray. Details that never would have been apparent in the video game start to jump out. Like this guy's cape. I always just assumed it was kind of a dark, dingy brown, but looking at the concept art, it's actually a little bit more green, with the contrasting green and yellow color palette being a very Elden Ring color scheme. And to reflect that, the color palette that I used for all these green details, mainly his cape and the saddle, was Army Painter Scarab Green, Pro-Acryl Mahogany, and Vallejo Ochre Brown, using the mahogany as a shadow tone and the ochre mixed into the scarab green as a highlight. After I got those last few colors cleaned up, all we had to do was the base. Since we're onto Limgrave proper, I wanted to introduce a little bit more greenery and vegetation onto these bases. Just because all these bases are pre-sculpted doesn't mean you have to stop there. It's been a while since I messed with these kinds of tufts and basing vegetation, so this was kind of a trial run. However, as I get more practice with it, you can be sure to expect a tutorial on how to do this in the later Tarnished Tuesdays. Give him the customary scarab green base rim that I'm giving all my Elden Ring minis, and our Tree Sentinel is ready to start his watch outside the stranded graveyard. Maybe it's a bit of recency bias, but I think this is one of my favorite miniatures that we've painted in this board game so far. It's a real testament to the sculptors and modelers that we got so much detail using such simple techniques on such an important mini. And to be entirely honest, I am already desperately trying to find ways to use him in other game systems as well. But that just about does it for this week's episode of Tarnished Tuesday. Keep an eye out for a poll on the channel to decide what we paint next. It'll probably be one of the smaller little gribbly units of enemies. As always, leave a like if you enjoy, drop a comment to let me know what you think, subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss an episode, and until we meet again friends, be safe, be kind, and don't you dare go hollow.